Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today we'll talk about what in the world is going on in Korea, that's South Korea. How concerned should we be about these events? Our guest for the show is Carl Baker, Senior Advisor, Pacific Forum. South Korea is an important ally of the U.S., so any signs of instability or threat should be of concern to us. And we need to follow what is going on there and what it means to us and to other countries in Asia. So we've had a whole bunch of things in South Korea that should give us concern lately. Can you give us a status report, Carl, about what has been happening and what concerns we should have?
Specifically, we need to talk about what happened with President Yoon Suk-yeol and his declaration of martial law, which sort of surprised everybody in early December. And then he was impeached by the parliament on December 14, and then the arrest warrant on December 31 for his insurrection. And so, it's been deteriorating. There has been a constant conflict between the two political parties. The Democratic Party, which was the opposition, and then the PPP, which is Yoon's party, have been in conflict at the National Assembly, trying to get things done. The Democratic Party, of course, accuses Yoon of being a sympathizer with the Japanese in some ways, because he's been working very hard to promote Japan-Korea relations. They see him as a conservative who is not trying to work with North Korea. There's been a big decrease in the amount of interaction between North and South Korea during the Yoon administration. They've accused him of being corrupt, and that's part of the issue with the legislature. His wife has been accused of graft, and so the anti-corruption institution or corruption investigation organization is the one that actually issued the warrant for his arrest. And his lawyers say they have no right to do this, but the fact is that they've been actively engaged in trying to find corruption in the Yoon administration. So it's just a big political mess in Korea right now over the two parties, and it's become somewhat moribund. And the political structure is ossified in the sense that the parties are in a revenge cycle, really since the beginning of democracy in the mid 1980s, when there was the first real democratic government in Korea. Prior to that, there wasn't really a democratic government. It was run by Park Chung-hee, and so democracy has struggled in Korea since, and the parties aren't really strong parties like you have in the United States, where the Republicans and the Democrats, the parties have changed over time. The names have changed, and it is largely driven by personalities. So it's always been much more populist than it has been in the United States.
Interesting. I've been thinking that, democracy does better if it stays in place for a long time. In other words, we have our democracy for a couple hundred years here in the United States, and we presumably know what it is. We can abide by the rules that were set up in the first place, and have had judicial gloss and legislative gloss for a couple hundred years. And so a country that has only had democracy for 40 years would not be in as good a position to have that understanding, to have everybody buy in, to the notion of democracy. Now, these days, I'm really not sure that that's true anymore. Although it seems clear to me that 40 years is not a long time in terms of making sure that everybody knows what it is. But then it also seems that 200 years is also not a long time at making sure that everybody understands what it is. I mean, what do you get out of that? Is democracy better off if it's been around for a long time? Or could a recent democracy be just as robust?
Well, I think it could be just as robust. I mean, to me, the problem I see with democracy, and specifically back in the early 2000s, I did some research on South Korean democracy, and the problem I see with Korean democracy specifically is that it was really a country that had a rich cultural tradition that included democracy. In fact, in Korea in the late 1890s and up until 1920, there was a strong movement, a democratic movement, but it was very much based in Korean culture. The 1980s version of democracy is very much a Western democracy. So you had Western organizational structures that were put into place in Korea. And so you had a formal democracy where you elected representatives and everything, but it was never really grounded in Korean culture. It was sort of a grafted organizational mechanism that they used to, and they called it democracy. But there was always the concern with the president taking bribes, the president involved with the shamanism and all kinds of accusations based on a structure that was very Western in its orientation and didn't really account for some of the ways that Koreans had traditionally aggregated political will. And so I think that's been a real problem for Korea. It's trying to figure out how to integrate Korean cultural institutions into a democratic system. And I think that's why you've had the parties, well, even though they've been populist in orientation, they've struggled with how do you actually aggregate political will in a system that is somewhat alien to Korean culture.
Maybe we've made some assumptions we shouldn't have made. I mean, namely that, yes, it's a democracy, and it's a long-lasting democracy, and it's a worthy democracy, and it knows what it's doing. And then all of a sudden, this. So you got this guy, Yoon, and he decides that for reasons that are not clear, and I wanted to ask you about that. He decides he wants to do martial law. Martial law is a straight line to the end of democracy and dictatorship. What was on his mind that he did that, and what would have happened had the martial law stuck?
Well, those are big questions, and I don't think we have answers to those yet. I think that's still an issue of debate. Remember that Yoon Suk Yeol was the prosecutor who impeached Park Geun-hye, the daughter of Park Chung-hee, and so it's ironic that a prosecutor, and this is one of the odd things about Korean political culture, is that the prosecutor has become a very important political figure in the system, because each president of Korea since the late 1980s has been prosecuted and has been either put in jail or impeached or something. There has been a prison sentence assigned to each former president in Korea. So there's this sort of weird legal culture that's developed that it literally is a revenge cycle where, as you switch parties, the other party comes in, the prosecutor comes on board and prosecutes the former president. And so so there's really a very much a dysfunctional kind of political structure that's in place that struggles with how to actually aggregate political will and implement policies.
Yeah, you're talking about the peaceful transfer of power. I'm talking about what Trump has been threatening, prosecuting his predecessors, or anyone who speaks against him. Isn't that the same thing? If that demonstrates an instability, don't we have it? We have the same virus, don't we?
Yeah, it's going to look a little bit different in the United States, but certainly this is a foretaste of what's coming. The way it seemed to me, the way it seems in the United States, that we are moving down that same path. Back to your point, is it doesn't really seem to matter how old your democracy is. There seems to be some fundamental flaw that when everything gets politicized, then it becomes impossible to govern because you have this desire to get revenge for what happened during your administration.
Not a good culture point at all. So the other thing I wanted to ask in the same context is about the crowds. You know, the world saw hundreds of thousands of people out in the street opposing his martial law announcement, and he ultimately backed down. But I think that's an incredible phenomenon to have all those people unified against him, and successfully so. I'm not sure that could happen in the United States, not these days.
Well, I want to go back and challenge what you're saying about what's happening in Seoul, because there is a pro-Yun group also, and they've really fortified the president's villa, and so I'm not so sure that, yes, there were large crowds, but there's also been a resurgence in his popularity amongst his people, of course, to defend him. So it's very much turned into a very tribal sort of activity here, where the conservatives are mustering forces and building fences and putting up barbed wire around his house, while there are people in the streets who are demanding that he be removed and all that. And this is up in the hands of the Constitutional Court now, where they're the ones who are going to decide whether the impeachment is valid. And this is coming up soon. Now that the new president has nominated two people to the Constitutional Court, so they can proceed with the decision on the impeachment. Now, can it happen in the United States? Sure, it can. I mean, and we may very well see something like this happen if Trump follows through on his promise that he's going to start prosecuting people like Liz Cheney and others who were involved with his what's the word I'm looking for, House investigation.
I just wonder what the dynamics are, and whether they're similar or not similar between the two. We have social media operating. The people on both sides of the question, will be sending social media, and maybe players and controllers outside the country who seek to perpetuate the crisis will be sending social media, and people will be reading and engaging with the social media, and I suspect that that's similar to the United States. Do you know what makes these crowds tick?
I would not claim to know what makes these crowds tick, other than this sense of tribalism and this sense of the need for revenge, but I don't think there's a single cause. I think there's also some who see it as a political opportunity. Certainly, if you're North Korean, you see this as an opportunity to put out information that's derogatory and damaging to South Korea as an institution, as a country, and certainly there's a temptation on all sides to overstate the case that the other side is corrupt and that the other side is soft on North Korea, and that on the Yoon side you're going to see people saying exactly what Yoon had said, is that they're preventing him from actually implementing policies that protect South Korea's security. And so this is the pro-Yoon side, is they're saying this is the work of North Korea. This is the work of evil forces that are moving to try to destroy Korea. And we're trying to, and the Yoon side is saying we're trying to work with Japan, trying to build a stronger alliance with the United States. And the progressive side, the Democratic Party people are saying, no, he's actually destroying any opportunities for progress, and he's taking advantage of the economic system in Korea to enrich himself, and his wife is corrupt and all that. I don't think there's a single answer. I think everybody has a slightly different view on what they're trying to do, or certainly certain groups. But it ultimately it's everything is politicized, much like it's happening in the United States. That everything that happens gets politicized, and the politicization gets exacerbated by everybody relying on their own news source to reaffirm what their beliefs are.
I really wonder whether this kind of thing, which seems to be happening in the world today, is a virus, kind of a global virus, and they see the media that you and I see here, and maybe they get caught up in it. Maybe they say, we should have a little instability too. So let's just throw stability to the wind and have it out. And I wonder your thoughts about whether they're copying or affected by the trouble in the U.S.
It's hard. It's hard for me to say that that's the case, just because Korea has, like I say, Korea has this culture of revenge that's been built into their political system. So, I could see what you're saying with the virus effect, but I think that there's enough momentum in Korea that it builds on its own virus, that it sees the American variant, and it certainly says, yeah, we believe that's part of this same disease, but the disease is also very indigenous.
What about Kim Jong-un? He must be enjoying this because he's definitely anti-South Korea in every way. He must love to see the instability, but is he also working at enhancing the instability, do you think? Aside from enjoying it, is he taking affirmative steps to make it worse?
I can't imagine that he is not. I mean, North Korea has a very sophisticated cyber capacity, so I'm sure that they're trying to influence what happens. They're trying to show that there's differences, and that there's irreconcilable differences. So I'm sure that they're feeding that kind of information into North Korea, and this is part of what Yoon is trying to do. He's saying that this movement by the Democratic Party is being fed by North Korea. And that's why what you've seen is since the beginning of the Yoon administration, a complete breakdown in any kind of North-South relations. I mean, since Yoon has taken the presidency, they've blown up the roads, saying we're not going to seek unification anymore. North Korea has written off unification in its constitution. Sure, I think Kim Jong-un sees this to his advantage, and in the meantime, with his new friends in Moscow, Kim Jong-un is feeling pretty confident that North Korea really has the upper hand. And this was some of the discussion that's going on, in that vacuum that was created after martial law was imposed, and then he was impeached. There was really this power vacuum, because he had said he turned over power to the premier, to the prime minister. And so who was going to run the country if in fact there was some provocation by North Korea? So I think that there is a concern in South Korea that the whole thing has become very debilitating, and this certainly plays to North Korea's favor.
Antony Blinken went there, maybe to try to improve things in some way and reinforce the relationship with the U.S. But while he was there, Kim Jong-un fired a missile over South Korea, that I thought was interesting. He hasn't fired that many missiles lately. He's been active on the Russian front, but not necessarily on the missile front. And I wonder what that means. What does that tell us? What does Blinken's trip tell us? And what does that missile tell us?
I'm going to dismiss the missile. I think that North Korea is on its own schedule when it does these missile launches. I don't think it's doing that as a signal to South Korea. I think that certainly Blinken was trying to reinforce the alliance relationship, trying to reassure South Korea that the United States recognized the importance of maintaining the alliance relationship. He met with the new president and talked to him. He talked to the foreign minister and national security advisor. So I'm sure that this was intended to show solidarity. Although even Blinken's visit is almost maybe coincidental, that he was there as his farewell tour to Asia, as much as it was to reinforce the relationship. But certainly the United States is trying to demonstrate that it wants to maintain the relationship. It's very concerned about trying to build a better relationship between U.S. China and U.S. Korea and Japan. And I think that they saw Yoon as someone who could do that, someone who was willing to work with Japan, because one of the disagreements that the progressives, the Deep Democratic Party, has had with Yoon is his willingness to work with Japan. And they see this as selling out Korea's demands for reparations from Japan for the war and all that. So I think that certainly the Biden administration and Blinken in particular are there to try to encourage the maintenance of the alliance and the trilateral relationship between the U.S., Japan, and Korea.
Well, has the Biden administration taken a position on this martial law issue? Have they taken a position on the impeachment or impeachments? There was more than one. And have they taken a position on the new president? Meeting with the new president sounds like that's an affirmation. What position has the U.S. taken with respect to all of this? Are we happy with these events? I mean, are we satisfied these events ultimately are expression of democracy, or are we unhappy?
It's kind of hard to tell what the Biden administration is really thinking these days, as invisible as they've become. But I think that the way I see the Biden administration is saying we support Korea whatever they do. They haven't, as far as I know, they have not taken a position on the declaration of martial law. They certainly have said that it's a Korea problem and Korea is a democracy and Korea needs to work through their problems. In some ways, I guess if you're an American in the Biden administration, you probably don't want to say too many things about transitions and about how things play out between the two parties. And so, as far as I know, I haven't seen anything that said that the Biden administration has taken a stand on whether Yoon was justified. They're waiting for the Constitutional Court to make that determination. And and that's going to. If you believe in rule of law, that's what you have to do, I think. So I wouldn't expect the United States to take a position until the Constitutional Court has its say on the validity of the impeachment.
If the premise is that this will all be resolved by the Constitutional Court, you have to question whether they have respect. Our courts have lost respect. Our Supreme Court has lost respect. Do people respect the Korean Constitutional Court well enough to accept the result, or is this just one step along the way to a resolution that we don't really know yet?
No, we don't. No, again, we don't know yet. This thing is still playing out. As we speak, the guy is holed up in his house, and there isn't a solution to this. So whether they're going to, no, they're not going to believe the Constitutional Court because they see the court just as Americans do, that it's jaded, it's biased, and so that's not going to be the resolution. Now the question is the pro-Yoon people are saying that Yoon had the right to declare martial law. It's a presidential prerogative if he sees this as a problem, and the only way you can actually, according to the Korean Constitution, prove that he was not justified declaring martial law is that it has to be an insurrection. And this becomes a legal argument. Then is was it an insurrection? Was he really trying to use force to prevent the National Assembly from meeting? The fact is that the National Assembly did meet, and so that would suggest that you're not going to be able to prove it in the court of law because he responded by withdrawing the martial law once the National Assembly voted. So again, it becomes a legal fight, but it's a legal fight in a long-standing battle between revenge in the context of revenge politics in South Korea. No, the Constitutional Court isn't going to satisfy anybody, but it is a step in the legal process. And I guess that's if you look at it from the outside looking in, the best you can hope for is some sort of legal process that allows the sides to come to an agreement on how to proceed once we make certain steps once we take certain steps that have to be taken. And that first step is for the Constitutional Court to decide whether the impeachment is valid.
Doesn't sound good. Sounds like chaos.
Sure.
We have plenty of that these days, and it doesn't sound like it's over. What are your thoughts about when it gets to be over, and what happens before it's over? Chaos has a way of eating an economy. It has a way of eating, foreign relations. It has a way of eating the rule of law. So if we agree that it's not over, that this chaos of its own sort is creating some sort of institutional damage, where are we, and where do we go?
What we're going to see that Yoon does get impeached, and that we probably have an election in the next year, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, and I'm guessing that the progressives will probably win the election, because I don't think that Yoon has the support that he needs to, or the PPP has the support he needs to actually get reelected.
So you say the next year, Carl. Within the next year, we're going to see the emergence of Donald Trump. Actually, within 10 days, and he's already, acting like president. I used to think it was president in waiting, but now I think it's more like president right now, today. And I wonder what position he's taken, what position he's likely to take, where this fits in his view of the world order. Because he's said, with respect to Greenland and Panama and Canada and all that he has a plan, or at least a concept. Where does North Korea, South Korea fit in that plan and concept? Has he made a statement about this? Has he agreed with Joe Biden's administration, whatever? Or does he have his own view of it? I thought that there was something he said that suggested that he was losing confidence in South Korea, but I don't remember when or what the circumstances were. What do you think?
I don't think he has said anything. As far as I know, he hasn't made any comment about the specifics of the what's going on right now, or about what he's going to do with Korea. I think from, if I want to try to guess what Donald Trump was going to do, is kind of a fool's errand, I suppose. But I think that and America in general really sees Korea through the lens of China, much like it sees everything. And my view is today Americans see everything through a lens that's colored by the prism of China. And so I think that the big question is what happens with the U.S.-China relationship. And I think that either even if Trump does decide to do something with Korea, it will be Korea siding with the United States against China in some way.
Mm.
And that means that he would support, and I think that this is really Biden's view also, or the Democratic view, if you will, since Biden is sort of irrelevant at this point. I think that there has to be some way to ensure that Korea and the United States maintain a relationship. And I think that that's really the key factor. Now, the question is for Trump, I suppose, is are we going to be able to get Korea to spend more money on its own defense? And are we going to be able to get Korea to reduce its trade imbalance with the United States? I think that those are the things that are most concerning on Trump's mind.
Yeah, sure. And I mentioned before that, instability at the institutional political level does have an effect on the economy. And, South Korea has some terrific tech products and cars. Samsung and Hyundai, they're major exporters. And if Trump decides he's going to put a big tariff against South Korea, that's really going to be a problem. Not so much theoretically for the exporter, but for all the people in this country who buy Samsung. I mean, it's everywhere, ubiquitous everywhere. At least in Hawaii, it is. And the same thing with the Hyundai cars. So that complicates it. If you're going to play that tariff game with South Korea, in South Korea's vulnerable situation right now, what kind of damage can that do?
Yeah, of course, it can do all kinds of damage. And I mean, this is the concern I think that everybody has about, how far do we push the tariffs, and are there extenuating circumstances like a almost enfeebled political system in Korea today? How long does it take to actually put Korea back on its feet where it can make meaningful political decisions, including its economic policy? I mean, Korea, just one of the things you didn't mention about Korea is that it's been one of the biggest foreign direct investors in the United States in recent years. For obvious reasons. It's been building a lot of cars. It's been moving fabrication, chip manufacturing into the United States. It's trying to take advantage of the CHIPS Act, just like everybody else. So there's a whole range of economic issues that come into play, and if the ossified political structure in Korea can't fix itself, then it's really vulnerable to machinations by someone like Trump, who seems to be pretty willing to be a bully and take advantage of any situation he sees, whether it's in the long-term interest of the U.S. South Korea relationship or not.
And on top of all of that, we have the plane crash.
Yeah.
The timing could not have been worse because it also questions the confidence. It raises questions about confidence in South Korea. And in fact, there's the blame game going on now within South Korea about the location of a wall alongside the runway. And had that wall not been there, all those lives probably wouldn't have been lost because the plane veered into the wall and blew up. The transport minister said he was going to resign, and that's a mess too. What if any effect does this plane crash have on this very fragile diplomatic situation?
I don't think it has much effect on the diplomatic situation. I think it does, it feeds into the fragile political dynamics within South Korea, that it reduces faith in the government. It reduces faith in South Korea's capacity to actually build things and do things, just do government administration. But on the other hand, there have been other bad things that have happened in Korea. Korea has been known to. I remember back in the 80s, Korea was known as the land of the almost right. You know, and by that I mean, there was always something about North Korean construction that there were just a few minor flaws, like the building collapsed. So so I think that there is some acceptance in South Korea that things happen. Construction isn't always done right, and of course this goes back to corruption and shoddy shoddy workmanship and things like that. That's not something new to Korea. This is something that Korea has struggled with. So I don't see it as basically I don't see the plane crash as being debilitating, a debilitating problem to the Korean government, but it certainly feeds the view that Korea is not as strong and as resilient as we might have thought.
How important is South Korea? And what should we do to help to restore confidence, to restore whatever influence it has or should have in the area, in the region, and with the United States? And Biden sends Blinken over there, and that's it's a good idea. Not sure that Trump is going to do the same kind of hand on your shoulder kind of diplomacy. Probably not. Maybe he will, as you suggest. Maybe he'll take advantage of the crisis. But what should the United States do, and how important is South Korea going forward?
Well, South Korea is important. I mean, in some ways, oddly, we're almost back to the late 1940s, where there's this dynamic between Korea and Taiwan. If you remember what was happening back in those days, that part of the reason why Taiwan is what it is today is because we diverted a ship from Korea to Taiwan to preserve the nationalist government in Taiwan at the time. And so so in some ways we're back to the fight over the Korean peninsula of, does North Korea, South Korea take control of the peninsula, the democratic versus the communist government in Korea, and the dynamic between Korea and Taiwan is still there because neither one of those conflicts has been resolved. So yeah, Korea is important. And do we need another Korean war for the United States to make that decision? Because remember, the other part of that late 40s was the United States wasn't fully committed to defending South Korea. So yeah, South Korea remains important, and it remains important for U.S. influence for sure, but it also remains important for the United States in the sense that, can it maintain a constructive relationship with Korea? Because the big concern I have now is North Korea has nuclear weapons. South Korea has depended on the United States for the nuclear umbrella. If you're South Korea, whether you have a Democratic Party or a People Power Party, do you believe that the United States is going to continue to provide that nuclear umbrella in the context of North Korea's nuclear weapons, in the context of North Korea relationship, in the context of China developing a much more robust nuclear capability? At what point does South Korea say, we really need to hedge our bet here and develop our own nuclear weapons? And I think that this is going to be a play, whether Yoon survives this ordeal or not. I don't think he will, but regardless, I think that this is going to become a big issue, and this is a big issue for the United States, because once you have South Korea make that decision, then it becomes a real problem for the United States to prevent others from doing it. So you have the nuclear proliferation problem in Korea, and you have the United States losing even more credibility in terms of providing a nuclear umbrella for Japan. And you have this increasing vulnerability of South Korea to activities from the provocations from the north, and the concern over, does China see Korea as being vulnerable, and as an opportunity to sort of pull China into the Chinese orbit based on what the United States does economically between China and Korea. In other words, if Trump does do something stupid like try to take advantage of South Korea's weakness or vulnerability at this point, and force them into something, does China then take advantage of that?
What about Japan? What about Taiwan? And of course, China, they're neighbors. They're neighbors to South Korea. They must be watching this very carefully. I don't know whether they've spoken on it, but certainly it offers the opportunity of, it offers opportunities, doesn't it? And I wonder if, Japan would help, because it's so close. There's a relationship. Have they been involved in any way, or are they just standing back and waiting to see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody, including the United States, is really standing back saying, we really don't want to be involved with this because it is very much an internal issue. And the Koreans have to figure out how to solve this thing. And so, no, the Japanese haven't really done anything, but clearly they favor Yoon. They favor Yoon and his party because they have been much more receptive to engaging Japan. And so, yeah, there's just any number of ways this thing can turn. And China, typically has not really done anything, said anything in this context. They're usually pretty willing to stand back, and much like Trump, if they see the opportunity, they'll probably take advantage of it, but they're not going to get out in front of anybody in that process. They'll wait and see how this plays out. Taiwan, they've got to just be saying, oh no, not another problem out here.
When you roll the stone over and look under, you find all kinds of issues that most people have not thought about. And I really appreciate, you're helping us understand that. Thank you so much, Carl Baker.
Thank you.